In this video, we're going to be breaking down what it's like to use the Nikon ZR coming from an fx6 and fx3 owner for the past like 5 years or so. If you're new here, I'm a director of photography based here in Los Angeles. I shoot a lot of commercial, fashion, and social media content. And if you're new to that kind of stuff, or if you want to see more Nikon ZR stuff, definitely stick around for the upcoming content because I've actually been really loving this camera. The first thing that really stood out to me was the lack of buttons. I didn't think this was going to be a big deal, to be honest with you, but there's only 3 custom buttons on the top of the camera on the Nikon ZR, and they don't really allow you to map it to whatever you want like how Sony does. There's more features that you can map it onto for a Sony camera as opposed to the Nikon. It really limits you, honestly. Like, let's say in a run and gun environment and you're outside, I am not the type to use the touchscreen for all of my like settings use and changing ISO or whatever. It just leaves a easier way to misclick, or like, I don't know, just like, let's say if you have sunscreen on your hands, or you're wearing gloves, or it's super cold outside when you're wearing gloves or something like that. It's just such an easier way to press a button as opposed to manually doing it on a touchscreen, because it's just easier to make a more precise, change as opposed to like having to navigate and misclick something by accident on a touchscreen. Not a big deal, but then it definitely is something that stood out to me. Like, let's say for your top buttons right here, I have mine mapped to like display info, and then zebras, and then white balance. But like, let's say if I want to change the ISO or the dual native ISO, I have to go into the menus and then change it by hitting 2 different buttons, as opposed to just like right on the directional pad and then changing your ISO. Not a big deal, like I said, but then it is kind of annoying, but camera is $2,100, $2,200 and the image is insane. So that's definitely something that is easily livable with. But that is the number one thing that definitely stood out to me coming from a Sony user. The second thing that really stood out to me was that the mega adapter that people use to mount their E-mount lenses onto their Z-mount cameras is definitely a really good option. It makes it usable for autofocus like this, but it is definitely not as good as being a native Sony lens like on my A7S III or my fx3. And it's definitely not as good, but it is good enough to get the job done. And right there, as you can see, that just happened right there. I'm glad it happened right there. Is that if you have the mega adapter, I noticed that there's actually an image shift sometimes when you're using it on a tripod or whatever, any kind of autofocus Sony lens. It just shifts like it just did right there. I'm gonna go ahead and replay that clip, but now my whole frame is changed. And that is definitely unacceptable in my opinion. The third thing that I noticed about the Nikon ZR is that it clips a little bit easier than the FX6 and the Red Komodo X. And if you're coming from an FX3 in particular, you're gonna notice that there's no noise reduction in the shadows on the Nikon ZR, or especially when you're shooting in R3D. So it will look a little bit more noisy than you're used to. So that is something to keep in mind as well for those that are not used to the RAW workflow. The next thing that I noticed was that you're gonna be really chewing through 1 terabyte cards like there's no other. Especially for a camera like this, where I feel like it's perfect for social media content. In R3D RAW, you're pretty much getting like an hour, hour and a half or something like that. And honestly, dude, if you're doing like a 30-minute take, which is this right now is at 20 minutes for this take, that's going to be like 500 gigs for this social media content kind of clip, That's kind of like crazy if you really think about it. This is just going to be going and living on YouTube. But even for like my client work, like for smaller jobs where if I'm just running this on a gimbal, and on my Sony, usually it'll be like 200 gigs per day. It might be around 1 terabyte to 1.5 terabytes per shoot day, which is kind of insane if you really think about it. There should be some kind of R3D compressed RAW that is like a NLE or like N whatever, some kind of like ELQ version of R3D RAW in this camera, because the 1 terabyte cards are pretty much not even going to be enough for like a multiple shoot day job kind of thing, So definitely keep that in mind, man, because you're going to be going through so much storage. It's crazy. I thought I was going to be fine with it, but like, damn, definitely something to keep in mind. And for those thinking like, yo, you have a Red Komodo X, how come this one doesn't take as much storage up? I mean, honestly, man, there's higher compression ratios in this camera than there is in this, because this shoots pretty much at the max codec on this camera all the time. And like, honestly, in a run and gun environment, I'm going to be rolling this more so, as opposed to this is going to be for sure more tailored and more specific shots, and shorter takes, as opposed to this, like this 20-minute talking head, kind of thing. So keep that in mind for sure. The next thing is for sure that the menu system on the Nikon ZR is definitely insanely confusing. It doesn't really make sense why they place certain things in there and where they are placed, but the number one thing that I just found earlier today that I've been trying to find for a long time was the auto energy saver mode, or whatever you want to call it. Pretty much where your camera's just sitting and you're not recording, it's gonna go to sleep and like turn off. It was like it like defaulted at like 10 seconds. So if you're setting up any shot, you know, like you only have 10 seconds before your camera will shut off, and that was the default, right? I think that that's kind of like crazy, but to find it in the settings, you would feel like it would be under energy saver mode, but it's not. It's in the custom button settings under power delay timer or something like that. And it's such a weird place, you know, but after I found that, it's obviously a lifesaver. But just the menus alone, man, you're gonna only have to experience it. If there wasn't tutorials out there to find things like that, this would be a nightmare of a use case, especially if you just picked up this camera for a job tomorrow, for instance. You know, trying to find everything is kind of like crazy. And so the last thing that I noticed as a FX6 and FX3 owner is that this screen has to be a standard on every single camera coming out in the future. If Nikon can do it on this small body, Sony can for sure do it, you know, Panasonic can do it, Canon can do it. This screen right here and the image quality, honestly the image quality is a huge plus, but I think the screen alone is my favorite feature on this camera. Not even the like the R3D RAW, you know, the image is very nice. All cameras in this day and age should be pretty nice, but this screen, I'm telling you, man, if you throw this thing on a gimbal, you might not even need a monitor outside. It's that good, you know, it's that good. But yeah, guys, this is Jean-Carlo here from G Crusty Pork. I really am loving this camera, to be honest with you. I just wish there's more cages that are out right now for this camera so I can pick up one that's not the smaller one. I wish that the menus were a little bit better. And I for sure wish that there's a compressed version of the R3D NE, like some kind of like ELQ mode or something like that would be really nice, just so you can use this in a variety of different situations as opposed to like how it is right now. But yeah, guys, this is Jean-Carlo here from G Crusty Pork, man. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys later.